It's Friday, best day of the week for many, for us included, because Shayna Goldman joins us from The Athletic. And we actually, Marty, have lots to discuss because the Sabres won a game with some new wrinkles last game. So why don't we start there with Shayna today?
Yeah, I'm going to start there, but a quick little sidebar. How did Jessie Pegula look in her match this morning? She won it in 3 sets, but you tweeted that you were watching it. Just want to get your scouting report on Jessie Pegula's match today.
Oh, it was such a good match. I love watching soccer replay. I love watching Pegula play, and they were just hammering the ball at each other. That third set, she dominated. So I'm really interested to see what she does from here. Now, I think she's going to get Iga Swiatek, who is on a roll. Like, that's going to be a killer match.
Yeah, I'm disappointed. Felix Auger-Aliassime lost in Medvedev in the other match. But anyway, that's a different story.
I was rooting for Medvedev. I'm sorry.
I know you do. You like Medvedev. That's okay. Okay, Sabres stuff. We saw them switching the lines back, but with a couple of wrinkles. Jack Quinn had a couple of assists and nice ones in the game against Anaheim. But what are some of the numbers for Jack Quinn? Just because we know he's a shooter. He scored a lot of goals in juniors and can score at the next level as well. But there wasn't a lot of shot attempts with his line last game. And so where do we see Quinn's game or his line's game with these new these new lines that Granato is rolling out?
Yeah, so last night he actually had his highest game score of the season. It was 3.96, which is not just good by his measures, but good by any player's measures. It's a very ideal night. They had the results. He had 2 assists, and that counts towards game score. And then below the surface, the line was outchancing their opponents in their minutes. So, it was really strong there. It was better against the Kings too, but we did see him slip a little bit against Calgary and Carolina, which were team-wide problems. So, the change in line mates might be working for him because it's always possible, like the kid line that they had got a little bit stale. There was a stretch where they were allowing more goals against than expected. And that's not necessarily on the line. That can be goaltending, but they weren't finishing their chances either. So I think in this new combination, it kind of opens the door to him being a little bit more of the primary shooter, which maybe will work for him. He's a volume shooter. And, it's different from someone like Olofsson who can kind of pick his spots a little bit more. So I wonder if this demotion, in a sense, because he's going from the second to the third line, is going to be good for him and make him the star of his line. Because when he's with Cousins, he's not going to be.
Yeah, obviously with Krebs and Middlestat, maybe that opens up that role, right, for Quinn to be the star of that line, which Krebs scored, Middlestat scored, and Quinn with 2 assists. So it's a good all-around night for that line. You talk about goaltending. And I am forever in trying to predict who the Sabres goaltender is going to be in the games. But I'm trying to make a case for Eric Comrie to probably play more. He's only played 3 games since returning from his injury and his rehab stint in Rochester. He's got 2 wins out of the 3. Not that he was great against Anaheim, but still got the job done, was better in the third period. So is there a case for Eric Comrie to play more when you look at some of the numbers?
Individually, no, but when you look at the entire picture, maybe, because, his whole season wide, he had that strong start. He had a couple stellar games that really pumped up his numbers. And then right before he got hurt, he had a couple terrible games that dragged him right back down. Mm-hmm. So all together on the season, he's allowed 7.75 goals above expected, which is pretty poor. Yeah. And in the last 3 games, he had 2 below average starts, but they were only slightly below average and 1 above average. So it shakes out to a minus 0.85, which isn't bad. That's, slightly below average. That's okay for someone that's been out of the lineup for a while and now he has to shake off the rest. Is there a case to say, hey, maybe he should shake it off a little bit more and see what he can do? Yes. And it's because the other goaltenders aren't that much better. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen has had minutes of brilliance. He's had minutes of average play. He's had minutes of below average play. So it all kind of shakes out to the same thing. You're working with 3 goaltenders who are all playing a little bit below average and could really pick it up for their team a little bit more to make the difference. Against Anaheim, Comrie had a really bad start. Goaltending was not in their favor, but then he picked it up when they needed him to. If he can build on that, he can start pushing for more starts because, you look at Luukkonen and you look at his numbers against Carolina and Calgary, they were pretty terrible. So there's a case to shake up the net a little bit more, but I don't know, unless someone's outright fantastic, that you roll with them as a true starter because each one has given such a mixed bag of results so far.
So it's a 3-headed monster, but it's not one that's easy to figure out right now either.
Exactly. And I know you're not a fan of carrying 3 goalies, so they're not making it any easier to decipher who should be the 2 moving forward.
I hate having only one game as a sample size to, really paint a picture here, but is there something that we may have seen with the switch of the top four defense to have Dahlin going back with Jokiharju and then Samuelsson playing with power that might be nice moving forward.
Yes. So the grain of salt is they were playing the Ducks, who are like the worst team in the league, the most disappointing team that you can imagine with some of the talent that they have. So against Anaheim, when it was Dahlin and Jokiharju, the shot attempts were 15-9 in their minutes for the Sabres. Shots on goal were 8-7, scoring chances were 9-7, and the goals were 2-1. So all of that's good. It was a very slight edge in expected goals too. All of that's fine. And it's better than where they were last year, because last year we look at it, they were below 42% of the expected goal share, and they had even they were about the same in results, so it really wasn't great. The thing that might be the deciding factor though is what happens with Power and Samuelsson, because if they're that good, maybe this convinces the coaches to keep this a little bit longer. For Power and Samuelsson against the Ducks, the Sabres had the edge in shot attempts 20-12, the edge in shots on goal 15-8, the edge in scoring chances 11-6, and 58% of the expected goal share. And they outscored their opponent 2-1. All of that looks good. It's one game though, and we don't have much from last year to rely on. So we know Dahlin and Jokiharju can go south. And if we see that happen in real time, there's that foundation to go back to from last year of going, it's really not great, but we don't have it for Power and Samuelsson together. So maybe it's good to see what they can do, because Samuelsson and Dahlin were just above break even. It's nothing incredible, and Jokiharju and Power weren't very good either together. So if they can find a new way to mix it up, it's not the worst. And
just add Chychrun.
Now that's a whole nother can of worms that would really be interesting, because you have someone who can play both sides. You can knock players to slots that are more appropriate for their skill set. Like, that is so ideal for Buffalo here. And the other thing is too, like the way they split their usage, like Buffalo really doesn't give much to their third pair because they can't handle it as well. And instead of it being one true top pair going up against top competition, we have seen it split. You know, the differences between what the top pair faces and the second pair isn't that great. And I think if you balance the pairs out this way, you can do it a little bit more, because you know Dahlin can take on that workload, and you know Samuelsson can. So I'd be curious, but if you can just add someone all together and answer this question, even better.
I actually think Power can handle it as well. So you got three of the top four that can play 25, 26 minutes if you have to, and kind of rely on two pairs. But Saturday night, we're going to get Dahlin versus Karlsson. And I mean, this is to me the top two players for the Norris right now. I know that there's a lot of other defensemen that have great numbers, but for me, like where I'm sitting, I say Karlsson 1, Dahlin 2. Like, what's the numbers showing for the two of them? Where do you see this for the rest of the season with those two?
Okay, so they are two of my top three, but there is a third player that I think has to be noted as well, and it's Adam Fox. And
I know I wasn't going to mention him, but that's okay, because it's the Rangers, and we don't like people with Rangers sweatshirts at other teams' game, right, Duffer?
Correct.
So you have Erik Karlsson, who is the best offensive defenseman in the league. Period. The end. It's, if we are going solely off offense, the trophy's his. He's scoring at an unreal pace. He's driving play at an unreal pace. And he has the worst forward quality of teammates of any of these three players. So he's really doing it himself. Now, for me, the Norris Trophy is not an all-offense trophy. It is not an MVP of defensemen either. It is the best all-around defenseman. I think to a point, his offense is so good because it's so strong below the surface and not just scoring. You can make the case that his offense outweighs any defensive deficiencies that he has. And he does have a couple. I think they're overblown, but he does have a couple. For Dahlin, you have a better, well-rounded defenseman. You have someone who is showing he can handle top competition. You have someone who can bring a little bit of defensive stability to some of the chaos that Buffalo does have. And you have someone that can drive play and is putting up points, because we know points are essential in Norris voting, right, yeah, wrong, or sideways. I think when we talk about all-around defensemen, there's someone who has the edge on him, and that is Fox. But to Dahlin's credit, he has a weaker quality of teammate on his defense pair than Fox does with Lindgren. And for some, that does count. So I think as it stands, that's your top three. And it's just a matter of what you think should be the way to actually vote for the Norris. And that differs for everybody.
Who would the next three be on your list?
Maybe Dougie Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Morrissey, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Hampus Lindholm.
Where's Heiskanen this year? Dallas is pretty good.
He's top 10. He's definitely top 10. He's really good. I think it's like we know the structure and the systems of everything in Dallas. Like, I feel like he's getting unlocked more this year, which is what we've been waiting for. And he was honestly the player I would have picked in the offseason or preseason, whatever it was. I was asked to decide, like, who would I pick? I had him. Maybe it's because I'm holding him to a higher standard, because I thought he was going to have like the strongest year out of anybody. I still think he's top 10, but I don't think he's going to get the appreciation, especially because of the scoring component.
What about, and I'm just going to say Roman Josi, because he was always top 5. And now Nashville's having such a terrible time. And they're even thinking of maybe Matthias Ekholm is on the block. And like, where's Josi and what's going on with Nashville? What are they going to do?
So my hot take with Josi was he shouldn't have been a finalist last year either.
That's going to sit really bad with Duffer, but that's okay.
You know what? Like, I can't knock a player for their usage, but I think that the usage is the most important, like one of the most important parts of the conversation with the Norris. Like, it's not his fault he played under 20% of the penalty kill minutes. It's not his fault that he doesn't have to do all the puck retrievals and the dirty work, and they know have Carrier handle that and just get the puck to Josi and let him go. And in Nashville, like, the forwards barely carry the puck in and he's leading it. So he had all these edges on his competition, but it felt like he was an MVP caliber player last year, someone for the Hart conversation, versus the Norris for me. When you saw what Makar and Hedman were doing, and those two led the way. The third one for me last year was Charlie McAvoy, because I just don't think he got enough credit for the actual defensive components. But we can't like wash over what Josi did last year. It was amazing. This year, it's not as good. It's not his fault. He's still very good. His team is still very not good. And it feels like it's just getting to a point where it's weighing on him even more. Like, UC Saros is doing everything to drag his team into the playoffs. And we've seen it in years past where he didn't have the best start, and the team, and all of a sudden in the second half, he got his team there when they had no business being there. This year, he's doing everything. He's one of the best goaltenders in the league, and it just isn't enough. So maybe they should sell a little bit.
Well, there are a handful of points out with a couple of games in hand, but there's been a lot of articles written in the Tennessean and Nashville Post, just regarding exactly where they are and what they may have to do here. And even Poyle said that, like, they've been waiting and waiting and waiting, and no one is grasping it for them to help carry them, where they need to be. So it sounds very much like a team that could sell some assets. Though this is the first time I read it today, and I get it, and I'm going to ask both of you, if they decided today to put UC Saros on the market, who would bite and how much would they net in a return?
That's a tough one.
I know nobody wants to answer the question because that's so unexpected, but
I know that's a curveball.
I think who would bite, because UC Saros would not just be like a team that's in the playoff picture.
2 more years at $5 million. So
I know that's
friendly.
Very, very team friendly. Well, the first team that comes to mind would be possibly LA, maybe even Vegas. Vegas seems to be on everything, right? So they'd be like, hey, UC Saros available, let's go. That would be the two of them. The return would be huge because of the value of the contract and the quality of play. So those are my two teams that I would say would bite.
I like that. I think UC Saros is fantastic. And I think the thing that's really encouraging for him, we never know how goalies are going to switch in systems, is he can manage chaos better than most. Sure, he's an undersized goaltender, there's this and that, but like, he is that good behind a terrible team. He is the difference maker. So I think that opens up the doors to a lot more teams like actually wanting to take that leap. I like LA. I think LA is a really good pick right there because their goaltending is not good, and they're going to want something to support that next core as they take over. I think it makes the most sense. They don't need a perfect goaltender because they are good defensively, but it would help. I like Seattle because I think they could use a goalie too.
How do they get out of Grubauer, though?
You know what? I think Grubauer, my hot take of this year, of this postseason, is that Grubauer is taking the starter's net back. I think we're seeing it start to happen, and they're going to do well in the playoffs, and it's going to be because of him.
But
I don't know that I would say because of him, but he'll maybe get the net back because by default, Martin Jones is not that good. So that is maybe
but
a
they
reason.
Can't carry Saros and Grubauer.
No, you can't. That's a good point. They have
But
to move the contract.
does anybody see the logo on my cap?
So I was gonna say them, but I don't want to seem too biased. I think that UC Saros would be so good for the Sabres. Like, I think
right.
you can get away with a little bit more chaos on defense, which they have, and that's fine if you have an elite goaltender. Like, you can go two ways. You can go average to below average goaltending, like slightly below average goaltending, nothing crazy, and have an elite team in front of the net and be fine. If you don't make your goalie do much, generally speaking, you're fine. Seattle last year would tell you they had perfect defense and, you know, the goaltending was that bad, but they didn't have offense. If you have both components, you can get away with not having the goaltending. If you don't have both components, and teams like the Rangers show that, you know, you can get away with elite goaltending to elevate you. Why not?
So here's the thing, Duffer. I've never been hot on the Chikrin. I've not been so hot on the Timo Meier either. Like, I'm like, stay the course. I am hot on UC Saros, and it's not even out there, right? Like, it's not a rumor, but if it was a case, I'd be.
Oh no.
So reason, as Shayna pointed out, like, I think he'd be really good and he can handle the chaos. Number two, I think the Sabres have a UC Saros in waiting and Devin Levi. And that would be like the precursor to maybe what it would be next coming in.
Not
and
imminent.
So, not imminent, but I'm saying, like, come in, right? UC Saros.
2 more years of Saros. Welcome, Levi. Perfect.
Exactly. So I'd be really hot on that one.
Okay, the other names mentioned in the Nashville Post today: Ekholm, Niederreiter, Fabro, and Granlund. We've talked about Ekholm a little bit, but let's keep it Sabre related. Are any of those names something that Buffalo, in your opinion, should consider? Shayna.
Fabro. Actually, Nino too. I think Nino's a really good forward. I like his contract too. Yeah. He can play different ways. He can play, you look at what he did with the Carolina Hurricanes, like, he can bring the skill, or he can be the one that's playing that chip and chase game and forecheck and put the pressure on. I think he's an underrated forward. I think that he was a really good ad for Nashville, and I don't want to see, like, the team around him sink his numbers, but he makes a ton of sense. I also like Fabro. I think the problem with Nashville is, like, this is a team that should have looked in the mirror a long time ago and been like, we should sell. We should step back, and we could quickly retool, and they didn't do it, and now they're here. They don't have a ton of assets to move, so you might have to move a bigger piece like a Fabro to get a lot back, because the other players you have just aren't going to net you that much. So I think in that capacity, it makes sense. And he could be a little bit of like a reclamation project, but not to the full extent as we've seen other players be.
What about Ekholm? Just because he's been in rumor mill and I don't see it, his contract is still got term and money. Like, what about Ekholm? Is this a player that has good numbers, or is it just an eye test and experience thing?
I think that he's someone that's like a prime overpaid candidate. I really do like Ekholm. I think in his prime he was excellent, but you look around and you're like, does it make sense for Buffalo and when they're in right now mode? Like, since they're not in right now mode, no. I think a contender is going to spend like a first or a second for him and do something ridiculous. And then again, maybe they don't. It's Nashville who messed up the market last year, getting Jeremy Lauzon for a second round pick. So if anyone's to blame, it's them for this situation. But maybe they can use it to their advantage and get way too much for Ekholm.
Or Florida with Ben Sherratt.
Oh yeah, another winner.
So Niederreiter's only got a year left at $4 million. I have to assume he's going to be one of the first to go here at the deadline if Nashville does decide to sell. Who do you think sees themselves as a good fit with Niederreiter?
Okay, well, I like him in Buffalo. I like him in Seattle because I think they're showing like they need any bits of star power they can get. And with Burakovsky's injury, you got to do something. That they're missing that. Mm-hmm. I like him in Winnipeg. I think Winnipeg could go splashy. They never do, but I don't think that they're going to be as much in like the Timo Meier conversation as anyone else might be. But I think they don't use Cole Perfetti enough, and he's really good. So if you're honest to God just not going to use him, and you know that, then you have to bring in a player the coaches are willing to use a little bit more without blocking his path. And the fact that he doesn't have a ton of term, I think ensures he doesn't block his path too much, and he could be really good for their middle six.
What about Dallas? Is there a fit for Dallas for like Nino Niederreiter?
Absolutely. Everyone's going to link them to Patrick Kane, and I get it. There's the star power quality, but do you really need an aging veteran who's bad defensively? Like, I'm not so sure. And you can hope that he can find that offensive magic in a team with more structure, which he'll have, and he won't be nearly as exposed. But I think someone like Niederreiter actually really makes sense for them, and I think could work in their middle six really well because the top line's perfect. No notes, never change it. Don't do anything. You got to do a little bit more. So I think it ensures kind of everyone gets knocked down a peg into a slot that works for them.
Dallas is interesting because they've been good enough, and yet if things ever click for Mason Marchment, and you talk maybe then about bringing a Nieder, like they could take another leap forward offensively here. So we'll, as we like to say, keep an eye on that. Tyler Bertuzzi, do you believe now that the Red Wings are hot and are close on not only a playoff spot, but close on getting Larkin wrapped up, I think the Wings' best option would be to just figure out a way to keep Bertuzzi as well?
I don't know. Like the Red Wings, they've been really good lately, but I feel like if anyone's logical about where they truly are and truly going to go, it's going to be Steve Yzerman. He seems to really understand his team's trajectory and when to sell and when to buy. I could see them moving a player like Bertuzzi and then being one of like the front runners for like a Timo Meier. Like, I don't think they're getting enough attention in that conversation. I feel like they could do something sneaky. And as much as New Jersey is willing to pay, and as much as, you know, the Canes are willing to pay, I think the Red Wings are the team that would step it up and go, nope, this is the player. We need to turn it around. And someone's going to pay a lot for Bertuzzi because yes, it's been a rough season injury wise. He's trended up since the deadline, since the All-Star break. He's better at 5-on-5 there. And he has that hard-nosed, net front physical ability that everybody wants in a playoff situation. It won't surprise me if a team like Dallas or Tampa Bay is jumping on, you know, the Bertuzzi boat and moves a lot for him. And some of those assets get flipped for a bigger player that we're not talking about enough.
Why am I not on the Bertuzzi boat? Like, I know that he had a great season last year with 62 points, but I'm just not a fan. And I like a gritty player. I like somebody that, but is my eyes failing me, or should I be looking for more with Bertuzzi?
I think we have high expectations for him and he hasn't matched them. And he's not the driver of his line. If he's not with Dylan Larkin, he's not as good. Lucas Raymond kind of jumped over him too in like the potential variety. And I just think that like we're looking at a player who at this point in his career, like is the next contract going to age well? It probably won't. And that's the thing. Like, so I see why it's that underwhelming kind of player. If you're going to pay someone, and I think he's 27 years old now, he's been difficult with his last few contracts. This is going to be the big one for him. It probably won't age well when we think of traditional aging curves. Now factor in his style of play. That net front physical role never ages well. Look at Jamie Benn in Dallas. Look at Corey Perry. Those players you don't want to overcommit to because it's going to burn you in the back end. And I think that's what would happen here.
All right, we have angry Twitter to get to in our final segment, Shayna, so we will let you go and look forward to seeing you again a week from now.
Thanks for having me.
Shayna Goldman, great stuff from The Athletic. We're back after this on Sabres Live.